Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you by the great folks over at Montana's. We've talked about them before. Head over to Montana's. They're bringing back the viewing party, daily deals. We're going to have some new ones to announce soon. Monday, half-price wings. Tuesday, kids eat for $2. Wednesday, all-you-can-eat ribs. And Thursday and every day, drink specials over at Montana's. Head on over to one of their 7 BC locations: Fort St. John, Kelowna, Langley, Nanaimo, Prince George, Tsawwassen, and, of course, Victoria. Be sure to check them out. Montana's. Lots of locations for you to check out over at Montana's. My name is David Quadrelli, joined as always by the man who built the place, Chris Faber. Our technical producer here on the Canucks Conversation is Alex Allard. He is back behind the controls. And Chris, we've got a lot to get to today. But before we get to anything, because as everybody knows, Jim Rutherford, Canucks president, spoke today. Lots to get to. It sucks that our show today can't just be about Gino Odjick's legacy in Vancouver. Over the weekend, as everybody knows by now, Gino Odjick passed away at the age of 52. Big loss for the Canucks alumni, just the city as a whole, the Indigenous community, everybody. Gino, the thing about Gino was that everybody seems to have a story about how Gino impacted them, whether it just be as simple as, hey, I watched him on TV. I was at the Coliseum and felt the chills down my spine when we started chanting Gino because there was a questionable hit in the corner while Gino's even sitting on the bench and that happened. That type of thing. But a lot of people have memories of Gino Odjick, and I genuinely wish that our show today could just be about Gino Odjick. Honestly, it sucks that we have to talk about the Rutherford press conference. We'll get to it in a sec, but I want to start right off the top. Gino Odjick is what I want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, all the stories about Gino are followed by somebody talking about a smile, and that's the exact same story that I have about Gino. Is, listen, Gino was at, I don't want to say every home game.
It was almost every home game.
I would say, that's the thing. He might have missed one or two here, but I can remember, I just saw him 2 weeks ago in the elevator, and it's a story where it made everyone smile. Where it's like we're all waiting for the elevator after the game, all the media members, and Gino's there, and he's laughing, and he's like, we're all about to get in at the same time, and he looks, and it's pretty crowded. He's like, you guys are more important than me, and it's just throws us through, and it's just I wasn't alive for the heyday of when, Gino was doing what he was doing on the ice, but you just watch some of these videos of the Coliseum reacting and some of these incredible stories about a guy who, listen, he fought very hard for a long time, and it's a very unfortunate situation to lose anybody. But I tell you what, this guy, when you look at life and you're gone, you look back at a legacy of a person, and this guy's legacy is incredible. What he means to a lot of people, whether it be in the Indigenous community or just Canucks fans or the hockey world, everything. You're not going to hear a bad word about Gino Odjick unless you fought him. Unless you fought Gino, then maybe.
Well, Ty Domi.
But even then,
yeah, a lot of these guys are coming out and saying, all the respect in the world for Gino. So even the guys that fought him, you see these videos. You saw that brawl against St. Louis where his shirt comes off. You don't think those guys had respect for what Gino was doing?
Yeah.
Even the guys that fought him have respect for Gino Odjick, the person.
So I've been at Rogers Arena for some pretty incredible moments. I was there for Game 7 when the Canucks beat the Blackhawks. That was the loudest I think I've ever heard the arena, obviously. The second loudest I've ever heard at Rogers Arena was, and this was 2000, this is probably 2011, 2012, 13. It's somewhere in that range where I wasn't covering the team and I was still just a fan. I'm there in a jersey, I'm drinking, I'm having a good time. And it was the first game where Gino came back to Rogers Arena and just kind of waved at fans after he was going through some treatment. This is 10 years ago, right? This was the first time he was back at Rogers Arena, and they showed him up on the Jumbotron, and that rivaled how loud it was in Game 7 when the Canucks slayed the Dragon. That arena went wild, what he meant to so many fans. So yeah, just a horrific loss, and we're all gonna miss him. Just smiling at I never talked to him for a long time, but it was just you always saw him and he just made you happy. So
yeah,
that it's a huge loss for the Canucks community, hockey community, everybody. So unfortunate news to start off the show. But
I talked to Gino once. I'll tell you what it was. So we're at the buffet table, ahead of a game, right? And I'm kind of zipping around before a game. I'm like buzzing around, and it was similar to the "you're more important than me" comment that he made about the elevator to you. Um, we're at the buffet table and we kind of arrive at the table at the same time. And I was like, "Oh, after you." Like I was like, "Go ahead." Like I wasn't in that much of a rush. He was like, "No, you need it more than I do," and I was like, all right, that was probably a comment about me being a little smaller than he is.
Yeah, he probably thought you were in puberty still.
Yeah. But yeah, he was like, you need it more than I do. And he was right. It was meatloaf. I loaded up on the meatloaf that night. But that was like my one conversation with Gino, was that. And I just kind of laughed at that comment. And it was, a great memory. And again, like you, wasn't alive when he was playing, but everybody knows his impact in the city. And I just want to quickly plug Stanch. Wyatt wrote a really fantastic article over at CanucksArmy.com.
Yeah, seen some stuff in the comments here as well. Sean comes in, says he was such a nice guy off the ice, and on the ice he was a monster. So entertaining. So yeah, you're going to see a ton of stuff out there. I know the province has some stuff. The Athletic, obviously Canucks Army. There's a lot of stuff for stories about Gino. It's a huge loss for the organization, and like I said, the hockey world in general. And yeah, he'll be missed. Absolutely, he'll be missed.
Yeah, and look, there's no easy way to pivot from that onto what we have to talk about. We'll keep this part quick. The road trip.
Yeah,
not much to say. One thing I want to start with, and it's a better transition to the road trip from talking about Gino. Ethan Bear scoring that goal in the game against his former team, the Carolina Hurricanes, talking post game about how maybe Gino was with them on that shot and on that goal. And he talked about Gino's impact, like when Carolina would visit and Bear was still in Carolina, when they would visit Vancouver, Gino would talk about how he hoped the Canucks would get him and that type of thing. And sure enough, Ethan Bear is now a Canuck and, scores a goal last night, just, moments after Gino's passing was announced.
Yeah. And we'll continue to remember Gino, but you're right. Let's
transition. Yep.
We'll transition here into the Canucks, talking about the road trip. Hard turn. We're going to take it. Canucks 1-4-0 on the most recent road trip. They had that shootout win against Carolina, as you mentioned, on Sunday after regulation losses to Florida, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, and Winnipeg. I tell you, Quads, right in this outline yesterday as the game was going on, I was probably in the camp of talking about this team going 0-5-0 on this trip. It looked like the Canucks were going to lose this game on Sunday. And I mean, this road trip was the one we've talked about for a long time of it feels like this is going to help cement some decisions of this team moving forward. And obviously the road trip that happened for this team, it was difficult, right? And it lived up to the expectations. Florida, Tampa, Pittsburgh, Winnipeg, Carolina. The Canucks get one win out of there. And then today, obviously, we talked to Jim Rutherford. I think we're going to spend a bulk of the episode here. Honestly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the road trip here. I think
they lost.
The way that we talked about it was, well, the way that we kind of saw it happen. So some of the stuff that kind of I do want to bring up for storylines, and we'll touch on this more with the Rutherford stuff, but the rumors swirling around a coaching change and the Rick Tocchet conversation, you see it on a Hockey Night in Canada. It's a tough spot for Bruce Boudreau to be in right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild that it just feels like what you're waiting for. Like I wanted to ask a question, like, is a coaching change coming? That's not the question anymore. It's how quickly is the coaching change coming?
Look,
because they're waiting for Rick Tocchet to get his 4 weeks. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're waiting for him to get out. Is it TNT?
Yes.
They're waiting for him to get out of TNT for 4 week deal. Like, it's wild.
So here's the thing is when Jim Rutherford, and we'll talk a lot about Rutherford's comments today. But when Jim Rutherford was asked about the coaching change, right? Like, what he said, and he was asked, I think it was Farhan Lalji of TSN, that by name asked him about the Rick Tocchet rumors, right? Because obviously, as you kind of mentioned, Drager, Dollywall, Friedman, everybody and their mother and their dog sounds like they're saying that Rick Tocchet is going to be the next head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. All of this, of course, as you mentioned, while Bruce Boudreau is still behind the bench. Like, those reports came out during a game that Bruce Boudreau was coaching. And I have to talk more with Frank about this, but I just saw it on Twitter that someone wrote that Frank said that he thinks Tocchet is already building out his staff. So there might just be more than Bruce that gets let go. We'll have to wait and see. I got to talk to Frank about that before I, run with it or anything. But basically, what I want to say is he explicitly asked about Rick Tocchet, and basically what Rutherford said was Bruce is the coach right now.
Yeah.
And then he was asked if he has interviewed anybody for Bruce's position. He said, going back months, I've been having conversations.
Interviews, not the right. Yeah, conversation. He's had talks with,
and he did say that also that it's if we make a coaching change. He didn't say like, hey, we're making a coaching change, I need you. He's getting the feelers out there. Interview, you're right, isn't the right word. It's not a proper search that they're filling a vacant position, but nonetheless,
he said it's gone back a couple of months that he's had conversations with potential coaches. That was the question. The question was asked about potential replacements.
Yes.
The answer to the question about replacements was it's been going on for multiple months.
Yeah, and it was Bruce is our coach right now, which, yes, that is a statement of fact.
No, it totally isn't. It's like, man, the situation for Boudreau has to just be horrendous right now, right?
Yeah.
Coming into work every day knowing that you're not going to be there very much longer. It's so strange. And Sean brings it up. Yeah, Talkett and Gonchar.
Sergei Gonchar got thrown around on the Merrick show today. And I think 32 Thoughts probably as well. I think Friedman was the one that kind of put it out there that he's not, I think he said he's not sure if it's going to be an assistant coach or an advisor. Like the Sedin's, Komisarek, all those guys that they have, Michael Samuelson. But he thinks Sergei Gonchar could be joining the Canucks, which is super exciting 10, 15 years ago, if you say that sentence.
Yeah, I think we should get into what I think was the biggest takeaway. And shout out to the media member that asked the great question.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay, do we have it?
Alex has it now.
Okay, we're moving officially to the Jim Rutherford Speaks section of the show.
Let's get to that, because I think, listen, I had all this stuff written in the outline for the road trip. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
The president of hockey operations came out and spoke today, so I want to play the audio. I think Alex is all set there for it. Well, he's got this. Get those out of there, Alex. You don't need the stats from the road trip. Alex is playing around. All right, I want to hear the Jim Rutherford
media
answer.
Member that asked this.
I wouldn't say handsome, but
you were patting this media member on the back quite a bit.
I included the question in the audio here, so you can hear Rutherford's answer to the question. Let's play it, and then let's just work off of it. So, Alex, go ahead and run retool versus rebuild if you got it all set there.
Jim, I think coming into the season, the expectations were for this team to get to the playoffs. Is what we kind of heard up to this point. We heard about building and building and building. Has that plan changed quite a bit? And is this team still building or looking towards a rebuild when you talk about these major surgeries?
We're not looking towards a rebuild. I'd rather call it a retool. My preference is when we make these deals is not necessarily for draft picks that may come in and help the team 4 years from now, 5 years from now. I'd prefer to get younger NHL players that maybe didn't work out in their entry-level contract and, bring them in, give them a second chance. We'll still try to acquire some draft picks, but we have to go about this in a way that it's not a long-term rebuild, okay? And I think we can do that. The possibilities are out there. Now, you get some of these players that have been 2 years in the league and haven't met their expectations. They may not turn out either. There's a risk in that. But it's no different than the draft pick that you take that you find out 3 years from now that they didn't develop properly. So that's kind of the direction we'd like to go. So it'll be a mix of draft picks and hopefully younger NHL guys that have NHL experience.
So here's where I'm going to start with that.
Sure. I got some stuff.
There is a massive difference between getting a 22-year-old who needs a second chance and an 18-year-old draft pick. And the massive difference to me is the value that you should have on that player compared to an 18-year-old is completely different. There's going to be views from organizations on first-round picks, second-round picks, players that aren't working out in your prospect system that have an incredibly higher amount of value than if you trade for a 23, 24-year-old guy who isn't working out at the NHL with your team or the team that he was on before he got traded. There is a massive difference in value there. And if you're talking about the difference between a retool and a rebuild, that's the two spots that I look at. And we've heard this now for a long time from Rutherford, from Alvin, of, in my eyes, retool is attached to adding NHL-ready players right now to get your team better next season, the year after that. Rebuild is taking a real step back, getting the 18, 19-year-old system to kind of, be revamped with this Canucks organization because it's so far behind. I find it so frustrating for Canucks fans or for people who follow this team to hear Jim Rutherford today come out and talk about the prospect pool being lacking. Like it's not a good prospect pool. We've seen it be bottom 5 in the NHL for a few years now, and it's not like it's massively improving. Though I do have some prospect stuff later that's exciting. But that's the thing, is you can't retool a prospect pool. You need to rebuild a prospect pool. And to get an NHL team, and I thought Harmon asked a great question about this as well, was that the teams that are able to initiate a retool instead of a rebuild have cap space. They have prospects already. Like think of the LA Kings right now. The LA Kings rebuilt. Now they're in a position to retool, right? Like trading for Kevin Fiala, that's a retool move in my eyes. Going in the direction of adding NHL talent, that's retool things. Rebuilding is, listen, taking step backs, and we're not going to be as good. And like, I have to give Rutherford props because he spoke for a long time, okay? Nearly a full hour with the media. He, the PR staff tried to shut it down. Rutherford's like, no, I want to answer all the questions. And he did. But Rutherford isn't going to purloin the fan base with his comments. And right now, at this point, the comments, do they mean much, right? Like, we just want to see action on this team. And the comments about a retool instead of a rebuild, to me, are incredibly daunting when a lot of the stuff that we've heard over the past, year and a bit that this management group has been in place, some of it was like it was very appealing to hear this organization was going to go in certain directions. We haven't seen that direction be taken even a step down that path yet. We've seen money be put back into JT Miller. We've seen money put into Ilya Mikheyev. We haven't seen really a step back of seeing what the prospect pool can get better at. They've given up a second round pick.
We've seen an accidental step back.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the step they're being put, like they didn't take a step. They were pushed down that path.
And to his credit, Jim Rutherford said, I'm disappointed in the job I've done so far. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of Canucks fans would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I give Jim credit for saying that. Like in a Canadian market, he knows that's going to be heavily scrutinized. Another quote that people picked up on, this was mentioned in the chat a few times, I thought we were tanking answer. Also followed up by either
a little bit of a chuckle, but also like
hang on a sec.
Yep.
Followed up by either a intentional smokescreen, either that or a fundamental misunderstanding and misconception of what tanking is, because he's asked if they would tank. Said, I already thought we were tanking. We're at the bottom of the standings. I'm never going to tell a coach or a player not to play hard or whatever. And then I think it was Farhan that followed that up and was like, that's not what tanking is. And basically was like, yeah, but you can make decisions. And he kind of said at that point, he was like, we can make decisions like that. So he didn't.
And that's the thing about tanking is, you're never telling your players go out and lose.
Yeah, but you are trading your leading scorer for assets.
And that's the thing. That's what management can do to get you into a better position for it, is to trade away the pieces that are going to help you win. Bo Horvat helps you win. He's going to help a playoff team win this year. He's going to help them in the playoffs. That's why I think with Kuzmenko too, and we heard the talk about Kuzmenko's, the conversations have already started about re-signing him. He's a player who helps you win. He's going to put up points. He's going to help you win. So there are moves for this team to get into a spot to even be tanking more than they accidentally have been, which is like, for a lot of people, it should be exciting, because that moving into towards at least committing from a management perspective on tanking is huge. That's what Canucks fans want. They want to see this team rebuild, and maybe you don't want to see this team lose, but tanking helps you actually not necessarily rebuild. Like, it's not going to force management to completely rebuild if they have a bad season this year, but it absolutely pushes them in that direction a little bit to consider maybe seeing some positive things coming out of this for this team down the road. If you start to lose, and it's just like the way they've been losing sets them up so well to actually do it, that it's just like this door is wide open to actually rebuild. And I think that's the worst part, was hearing the word retool, because this fan base, this organization, like it's 10 years, man. The Canucks could have tried to retool in like 2013, and they did, and it didn't work. And then they tried again in 2016. Then they tried again in 2020, and then in 21. Like, retooling doesn't work, man. Like, I don't know. There's just such a history of seeing how rebuilds can work for a team and get them back to a playoff team that's going to be there year after year after year. instead of what retooling looks like when you're a team that needs a rebuild, where you might have a chance of the playoffs. You might have, it's just Canucks fans are too engaged, care too much about this team to put them through what they're going through of retooling. And it's just, that's the worst word for Vancouver fans to hear. And it was heard multiple times today from Jim Rutherford. I give him props for standing up there and answering every question, or sitting up there. He answered every question. He was very honest about it. I give him 100% props for how he addressed, and how he spoke with media, how he spent extra time, told the PR staff, no, don't shut it down, let me keep going, answer all these questions.
A couple more questions, and he said no.
He said, yeah, no, like, I have time for all the questions, and that was great. Give him absolute props for that, and give him props for being honest. But it felt like his honest answers still, and you give a guy in this position, you say, like, to hear him be honest was great. That's what a lot of people want to hear, honesty. Because I think now, from the takeaway from this, you can say, okay, this team isn't going to rebuild. It's like they aren't. He was honest. Jim Rutherford's very honest. They're not going to rebuild. They're going to try and retool. Like, adding these young players adding young NHL players instead it is. We all know what we're in for now. This was like in steps of fans understanding a plan for this team moving forward. Now, like, 100%. They're not competing this season. Sounds like they won't be competing next season, but it sounds like they're going to go for it the year after that, because when Drance asked him about a timeline, he said 3 years, or quicker than that.
Yeah.
So you're not in a 4 or 5 year rebuild, or even rebuilds now are only 2, 3, 4 years, in that range. They're not. They're not going to add these draft picks. They want these 21-year-old, 20-year-old players. Yeah. It sucks. It sucks to hear the word retool. And I know people, like, online, in the chat, everywhere, retool's the worst word to hear.
Okay, I get it. But I also, and David, funny enough, his name's David, said, why people focus so much on the semantics makes no sense to me. Big changes are coming to this team. That's clear as day. Now, Rutherford spoke about this idea of what needs rebuilding, right? And he basically said, we have contracts that, suck, basically, that we can't get rid of, that we'd like to get rid of. I talked about buyouts, that sort of stuff. He talked about this team needs cap space. We're not going to get into the whole, well, why'd you sign Ilya Mikheyev? Why'd you do this, that, whatever. My point here is that he talked about the core not needing any changes. Like he said, our core isn't the problem. It's the other players around the core. He said the core might not be off limits, right? And we've heard reports that Pettersson's the only one that's actually off limits, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. But he did give a vote of confidence for this core. So with all that in mind, and again, the part about not all of the core is going to be staying type of deal, right? Focusing in on that, I'm looking at this and saying, well, this actually sounds a lot like a rebuild. Now, what he said was
we could move core players out, is his quote. He also said that some decisions will be popular and some won't, because what they're going to do. And in that quote, he mentioned moving on for a young center and a young right shot defenseman. So yes, certain players from the core are going to be getting moved out. But at the same time, I ask you this, Quads, name me the players of this core then. Name the players of this core that maybe Rutherford's talking about.
I thought about this because I went back and I tried to remember who they said when they were asked explicitly this past offseason who their core is. I believe Alvin said everybody but Brock Besser. Everybody that you would think, like the Demko, the Hughes, Pettersson, Horvat, Miller, he mentioned. And I believe that was it.
Demko, probably.
Didn't I say Demko?
Sorry, I might have missed
Whatever, regardless. Those were who he said, and I don't think he mentioned Brock Besser as part of that core. So I would say those guys. I would say those guys are the core players. Now, who's getting moved from that? Okay, well, Bo. There's the easy one, right? Bo is probably getting moved. So my point is that might be the extent of what this team does in reshaping their core. Bo's a big part of the core. He's a massive part of the core. And Rutherford also didn't shut down the idea of shutting down Thatcher Demko for the year. He said, obviously, Demko's going to want to play, but he said, I haven't really thought about it in that sense. And he just basically said, we're not going to be rushing him back. We want to make sure he's 110% when he comes back. But I want to focus back on this here, Chris, with the whole idea of retool versus rebuild. Now, I think the big difference comes with what Rutherford said he wants to target. Now, in a rebuild, you're acquiring draft picks because, as a lot of people have already pointed out, when you go get draft picks as your main main thing that you're targeting in these trades, first of all, teams have more of them than young prospects that you want, right? Like, think about it, like a roster player. Like, what contending team is saying, okay, here's a roster player for Luke Shen? You know what I mean? Like,
I know it's such a small amount of teams that are like, oh, we have a third line center that we believe in to be a really good NHL player for years to come, but we'll do it for the upgrade right now.
Totally.
Because smart NHL teams won't do that.
Yep.
Smart NHL teams won't move on from a guy who's playing on their fourth line, but they expect to be a top 6 guy. Why would they move on from him unless they're really, and that's what I'm thinking, there's probably like 3 to 5 teams this year that are like all out for winning the cup this year. Everything. Future doesn't matter. Next year doesn't matter. We want to win the cup this year. There's like maybe 3 to 5 teams in that spot. How many of those 3 to 5 teams are in a spot of their cycle where they have 20 to 22-year-old centers and right shot defensemen coming up into the system that they're willing to move on from? I can't see it. Like,
it totally limits your teams that you can trade with.
It needs to be a
does.
perfect scenario, and there's just not perfect scenarios in the cap world for this Canucks team.
Yeah. So my point here, Chris, is just that's where I think the big difference is between the rebuild and the retool talk. The point is that change is coming. Now we turn to the future and get ready to criticize or, praise, like you said, some moves will be popular, some won't, the moves that they make to make these changes, right? Like, now it shifts to that. Rutherford didn't come out and say, this team's great, we're going to keep doubling down on everything. He did kind of say that about the core, but he also
let's pull the quote about surgery then. Minor versus major surgery, because I think this speaks to what you're talking about there.
We got a clip of it, or you read it?
We have
okay.
the
Okay, you want me to read it?
Yeah, you go. You're I keep cutting you off here.
When I came here, this is Rutherford. When I came here, I knew it was going to be a big challenge. I knew we were going to have to make minor surgery. Nice analogy. Have I changed my position? Yeah, we have to make major surgery. That Canucks president, Jim Rutherford. Okay, so my point, Chris, is just that I think the whole rebuild retool thing is a bit, like we shouldn't spend 30 minutes talking about, oh man, they said the word retool. Like, I understand it pisses people off. I totally get it. And I totally understand that the biggest difference is that they are going to target young players rather than draft picks. And again, what I was trying to say is that if you acquire draft picks, you are able to flip those for young players.
Totally.
Like,
yes.
Draft capital is very valuable around the league. The Montreal Canadiens, they were rebuilding. They went and flipped a first and a third for Kirby Dach, a player who, who did the Habs have that they traded? Tyler Toffoli, okay? You cannot get Kirby Dach, a player that the Habs liked, has already set a career high in points this season with Montreal. You cannot get that player if you approach the Chicago Blackhawks at the deadline and say, hey, we have Tyler Toffoli. Does that interest you? No, it does not. You're not able to get Kirby Dach if you don't make that trade with Tyler Toffoli to a contender for draft capital in return. My point here, Chris, is that I understand people are upset that the word retool was used. My main point is that we need to actually pay attention and talk about. I'm tired of just coming here saying, oh, they need to rebuild. They need to rebuild. We need to talk about why what they're saying is what they're saying is going to actually mean. And I think I just laid it out. Like, what I'm trying to say is that right now this team has decided that they are going to retool. I think what they're, and again, he didn't close the door on acquiring draft picks, right?
No, he said we both, yeah. One
savvy trade where you go get a first and a prospect you like. You can have it both ways. With a Bo Horvat trade, let's use that as the example. Okay. One savvy trade where you get a first round pick, and Bo Horvat. And again, I don't think the team's at this stage, but if they think they're in this retool stage, they can still acquire draft picks and then flip those for prospects that they like. They can do that if they want to. I'm not here to say that it's right or wrong. I'm of the opinion that they need a proper rebuild, but they can still pull this off. They can still do that. I don't think it's going to be the best way to operate. As I just said, draft picks are king in this league, right? And you can make moves like I just outlined with the Montreal Canadiens that, play to your idea of a retool. Like I said, the Habs wouldn't have been able to get Kirby Dach if they didn't at first make trades to acquire more draft capital as a rebuilding team, right? So again, at this deadline, Chris, I would like to see the Canucks go out and get a bunch of draft picks. And then, I would like to see that. And then I would like to see them use that draft capital to draft players at the draft. That's my opinion. But this team can still make trades for draft picks at the deadline and go flip them all at the draft. I know people would have a field day over it, but what if you're flipping those for players that you believe in that come in and have career years and then they're now part of your core for a long time? Again, I don't think the Canucks are at that stage yet. I want to rebuild, but I'm saying this team can still pull this off. Like, they can go out and do that. What I am going to criticize, and again, he didn't close the door on getting draft picks. I am going to criticize the idea of, well, we want young players. Like, that's the main pieces that we want. Yeah, I think that's a flawed strategy because I'm not going to repeat myself. As I just said,
it's a riskier strategy.
It is. It's much riskier. It's much riskier.
It's incredibly risky because the way that I heard some of the things today from Rutherford was like guys that aren't working on teams and need a second chance.
Jack Studnicka has entered the chat.
I know, but like to a higher level is like Kirby Doc. You bring up, that's a really good example, I think, to actually work with here, who is 21 years old. Like, that's the type of player the Canucks would target, right? You'd like to see Kirby Doc as your third line center for the future, for sure.
First
Maybe
and a third, they had to give up.
Yeah,
for
they
him.
gave up a 13th overall pick and the 66th pick to get him. That's the key. It's the picks. It's the picks. It's the currency of the NHL. You need to find the balance between currency between draft picks and cap space. And it's like in chess when you, like when I don't play chess, but the part that I understand about it is you don't just like move a piece. You move the piece and you think, okay, where are they going to move? How does this affect it? How does this affect? That's the way everything's going to be connected with this team in a rebuild. And I think a retool, it's not like everything's connected. A retool is, to me, what we've heard from Patrick Alvin about building and building and building. A retool is getting better right now, getting better in the short term. And maybe it helps you in the long term, right? Like, I think there's going to be a very big difference. A retool move would be moving Luke Shen for, I don't know, insert fourth line winger here. A retool was, trading for Tyler Mott. Like, that was a retool move. He helps this team longer term than they trade Thomas Vanek for him, right? Like that helped the team in a retool move, but that wasn't a rebuild move. Instead, if you would have got a 4th round pick, that player would be like 20 years old right now, and maybe be excited about him a little bit because he's playing good in the NCAA, or in his 3rd SHL season. Now he's scoring goals, or maybe he's turning into someone like Linus Karlsson or even better. Like, those are rebuilding moves that you can see actually work in the long term, where what's like a retool move to me was in a smaller degree, because it's not like the Horvat return is going to get you Tyler Mott. But if that was a retool move, what's Tyler Mott doing for the organization now? What's he doing for the Canucks now? Nothing.
Which is why they traded him for a 4th round pick.
They have a 4th round pick coming. So I guess, there is something there.
There's one rebuilding move.
Yeah.
But that's not enough, is what you're about to say, right? Yeah. Is like, you can't just trade your bottom 6 forwards for 3rd and 4th round picks and say, look, guys, we did it. The rebuild's
now
over.
That I say it out loud, actually, it's like, that is it worked as long as to a rebuild move, actually, now I think about it. Because now you have this 4th round pick, actually. That was a horrible example.
That's like you making that's like you building a jigsaw puzzle of the Stanley Cup, and you put in one piece and you said, guys, we did it. We found the bottom left corner. We're done.
Yeah. But I mean, at least that one actually has worked out. Thomas Vanek is going to turn into a 4th round pick.
You're turning all red because you just contradicted yourself.
I know.
But it was a good example.
It worked in my brain leading up to it. That's what I say. I open up my mouth, I start talking, and then maybe
the quote of the day, folks, is it's like playing chess. I don't play chess.
Well, that's the truth there.
Let's get back on track.
One more other. Let's bring up this one. The Miller contract.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a tweet here from Thomas Drance of the quote, because the Miller contract is one to look at when you hear Jim Rutherford talk about how difficult it is to deal with cap space. He says in this quote, the cap is going up and up. The cap is going to be $90 or $95 million. That contract isn't going to affect what the Canucks do down the road.
File that one away. Oh, that's what Drance wrote in his tweet. Yeah, file this one away. Okay, I understand where he's coming from.
The quote, I guess, could be like taken out of context a little bit, because I'm sure there was more in the paragraph about it, and there was more about how the question he was answering.
Yeah.
But that direct quote is completely incorrect. The contract is absolutely going to affect what the Canucks do down the road.
Yeah, but what he means is it's not going to be like OEL right now. How OEL right now is affecting what the Canucks are able to do.
Sure, but 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 7 years from now, Absolutely, that contract is going to affect what the Canucks do down the road. If the cap goes up to $105 million in 6 years,
Yeah.
the Miller contract is still going to be very impactful for what you can do.
Devil's advocate, every team has a bad contract on the books. There's at least 1 or 2 bad contracts.
Not the Canucks. They have a bunch.
The Canucks have like 8, but yeah, they have too many to fill out their roster. Okay, what I'm trying to say here is every team has a bad 1 or 2 contracts. Right now, with all the money expiring, yeah, maybe Miller's is going to be the bad contract, and it's not really going to affect what the Canucks do too much because it's just one bad contract, and it's like, all right. Like, you look at every other team, every contending team has a bad contract, and it's not affecting what they're able to do, right? And I think that's what he's trying to say. Now, the interesting part will be if they add more of these, that they say, well, this one wasn't going to be a problem, but now we have 3 of them, and now it is a problem. Like, in a vacuum, $3 million to Jay Beagle to be the best penalty killer in the league probably isn't going to affect what you do too much, but couple it with, okay, we also paid Antoine Roussel, we also paid Brandon Sutter, we also paid Louis Eriksson, and you get the Jim Benning era Canucks.
And then you had look what that led to in a trade. Now you have OEL. Like
now you have OEL. Yes,
that's the opposite of my 40 chest thing that I just said about Tyler Mott. But
macaroni and cheese, baby.
That is the thing. It's like, yeah, JT Miller's producing even at what he's at right now. And you look is like there's a chance that JT Miller gets better next season in like the scope of hockey, right? Like as an offensive and offensively, maybe not. Defensively, you sure hope so. Like he could be better next season. Is he going to be better at 34? Is he going to be better at 36? I see it very hard for that to be possible. So to say that that's not going to affect $8 million, like it is going to affect what happens.
It is. It's just not gonna be this, it's not gonna hamstring.
And then on top of that, it's like, okay, there was talk of buyouts today.
Mm-hmm.
You buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Harm said this on the show on Friday. Listen, Quads, you're a young kid. Gino Odjick, wondering if you're still going through puberty or not. But you're going to be 30 years old if they buy out OEL. You're going to be 30. I turned 30 this year, and it's hitting me like a truck that I turned 30. I'm not young anymore. You're going to have that. It's going to hit you, and the Canucks are still going to have a buyout of OEL hitting on the cap. Then you add that, maybe with another buyout that might come down the road. You add that with JT Miller being 35. Like, I don't know. It's just like you see these things that are going to be on this team for 4, 5, 6 years, and you're like, they need a rebuild to give that thing a chance. I know you don't want to spend all this time on a rebuild and retool, but to me it really is, because a retool could really hurt. Like, retool is extremely risky in my eyes. Going for it is risky for sure. Retooling might be riskier. Like, it is.
Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec.
Especially with this team 10 years into it.
Okay. Yeah, but you're getting caught up on the word again. Like, let's talk about what
I'm hearing the plan from. I'm hearing the plan.
Okay, here's the thing. We keep talking about the quads plan, right? Which you've endorsed, right?
I don't know the quads plan.
Everybody knows the quads plan.
You barely know the quads plan.
We've talked about these moves of, okay, you keep Quinn Hughes, you keep Elias Pettersson, and you flip everybody else that you can. You're probably going to have to keep JT Miller, okay? Let's add that to the quads plan because you're not giving him an asset to get out of that, okay? I've adopted that into the quads plan. Keeping JT Miller is part of the plan now, okay? You buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson, which it sure sounds like they might do. Well, hopefully, we hope, with the talk of buyouts. The retooling moves, if you are savvy about them, it's not all that different from a rebuild. Like, I'm asking you, I'm asking you now, tell me the difference between this team rebuilding and this team retooling. Go ahead, tell me.
It's like 4 years.
No, I'm not asking for a timeline. I want you to tell me what moves.
I'm saying the ages of the players that you're going for is probably 4 years difference.
Okay.
Instead of going for 23-year-olds, you're going for guys that are about to be drafted at 18.
Okay, so personally, I think when you're looking at a retool, you can go out and get guys like Kirby Dach. We're still like, what was he when they acquired him? 20, 21?
20,
yeah.
21, yeah, he's 21.
Okay, I think you can go get these guys in a retool. Now, if you're trying to make trades across the board, it's not as easy as I just said. You got to go get the draft picks first. Mm-hmm. I agree with you there, Chris. But if this team wants to retool, and again, the whole idea of, okay, well, we need to keep Elias Pettersson happy. Like, of course, they're not going to go scorched earth rebuild. Like, and again, he said the 3-year timeline, they can be competitive before that. Okay. So he set that for himself now. Okay. I don't know.
He said quicker than that.
Yeah, he said quicker than that. I don't know if the whole idea of what this team actually looks like rebuilding versus retooling is one, all that different, or two, if it's this tire fire and it's going to be this detrimental to the future of the team idea, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think a rebuild and a retool for this team look all that different because, hey, like if we're talking rebuild and you're talking about trading Quinn Hughes and you're talking about Elias Pettersson, I'm not really on board with that.
No, it's the way to monetize in a retool compared to a rebuild is vastly different.
I think this team needs to make one or two, let's say 2 or 3 trades this trade deadline for draft picks, and then they can go ahead and shift themselves in the retooling shape or whatever.
No, they can't.
This is what the Habs did. This is literally what the Habs did.
The Habs have prospects coming. The Canucks have who coming to the NHL?
Niels Höglander, Vasily Podkolzin, not in the NHL right now. Yeah. I'm not trying to get caught up on this with you. I'm saying the Habs had one trade deadline where they made disciplined rebuilding moves. Okay. Would you call what they're in a rebuild? Because you just said the Kirby Dach thing's a retooling move. That's not a rebuilding move. You're shifting to retooling.
Well, if he's 20 years old, it's different than a 24-year-old team. That's what I'm saying with 4-year difference.
Sure. Okay, and I agree with you there. It's about who they target once they enter that retooling phase. I don't think this team's turning down the opportunity to go get a Kirby Dach and saying, oh, you know what? He's a little bit too young because we're in a retool. I don't think this team is doing that. When they do, I will criticize them. Right now, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not going to sit here and cry for 45 minutes about, oh, they used the word retool and I can't believe it. This team, my opinion, needs to go out and have one deadline. All I want is one deadline with disciplined moves where they are trading for futures. They are not saying, you know what, we're going to trade Bo Horvat for a 24-year-old center and a 23-year-old right shot defenseman. I'm not going to try and come up with an example right now, but where they say, okay, we're going to get a prospect or a young player that we like who's, 21, 22. Filip Chytil, there's an example, okay? We're going to do Filip Chytil in a first for Bo Horvat or whatever, right? A high first, it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is they can have it both ways at this deadline if they are smart. Now, if they go ahead and re-up Andrei Kuzmenko because they say, well, we think he's part of the retool here, I would have a problem with that. Okay?
That's what I'm saying. If you commit, like what you're saying is they need one deadline.
They need one deadline.
They don't. Because if they do one deadline and then they completely flip back to let's get competitive, that's not going to work. Look at what you talk about the Canadiens. Are the Canadiens rebuilding this season? Yes. Were they coming into this season with thoughts of the playoffs? Very much doubt it. They just went to the Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And then they had a disciplined deadline.
A disciplined season to follow where the young players are being given opportunity. Hear the way PK Subban talked about playing for this team and building a culture. It's not like they just went out and did kind of like what Ottawa did, where they brought in these veteran players who are going to help and make this culture. They left it for a year. They're leaving it for this season to build the culture of these young guys. It's like what Rutherford said today.
Around Caulfield and Suzuki, two guys that they had on that cup run.
Yep. And it's like what Rutherford said today. Like, he doesn't think that this team, that this organization, the players on the ice are playing like a team. He says you don't see it consistently. The culture is a massive part of it. They aren't playing like a team. They play like a team on occasion. They look Canucks look good.
So build around Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, no, for sure.
That's why I say, that's why I keep going back to it. And Corey Anderson jumped in the chat here and said, I think the reason he's saying retool is because he knows you can build around EP40, Miller, Hughes, and Demko. Those pieces will still be good enough with proper trades, and they'll still want to stick around. Like, I get that the retool hasn't worked for this team, and I understand that, people have trust issues with this management and this ownership and the whole organization as a whole, because when last time they said retool, they were like, you know what? We're going to get Emerson Edom. There's a name you didn't think you'd hear today. We're going to go, geez, I almost swore. We're going to go get all these players that flat out just didn't work out, right? Like bad targets. With the exception of Riley Stillman, who was traded largely for cap reasons and money reasons, okay? This team, this management regime, all of their acquisitions have been pretty solid. Like, if they had cap space and they had a blank slate to go out and build a team, I would say that I trust their judgment when it comes to identifying players. Ethan Bear, he's going to be here for a while. Ethan Bear came here, he was immediately the Canucks' second best defenseman. Okay? Despite what Bruce Boudreau might say. Why am I blanking on the other one? Ilya Mikheyev. I know it probably in process wasn't the best time to sign Ilya Mikheyev. Mikheyev's a good player. He's worked out for the Canucks the way they hoped he would. Again, process, don't love it. Not like he's not making a difference, right? This team's still at the bottom of the standings, but he's one guy. He's one guy, and that's why Rutherford comes out and says stuff like, we need to fix the guys around him, right? Around our core. That's what this team thinks they need. And again, I have no reason to believe that they can't identify the proper talent to bring in here. I'm done.
Okay. I think this is a conversation that'll continue. To
it will. And again, I'm not saying I don't want to rebuild.
Prospects report. I got all this.
Yeah, we'll go to Betway in a sec, but I don't even want to get in. Like, I still personally, like, if I was at the helm, I would do a rebuild. But I'm not going to come here and cry about it for 30 minutes or 45 or long. We're going overtime here. I'm not going to come out here and cry about it and say, oh man, I can't believe they said the word retool again, because I think that there's a chance here with strong moves at the deadline. And again, we got to see what they do at the deadline, and then we'll criticize it as such when it happens. We're only like 40-something days away from that, right? With a strong deadline, this team can, for lack of a better term, be turned around in a hurry.
I don't know about that. I think that there's enough things that have happened in the organization that, to me, are rotten, that 4 trades isn't going to make this organization back on the right track. I think there's enough damage.
Well, it's what you do after that too, right?
Yep, you're right.
It matters. And again, that's why I'm not coming out here and saying they're doomed. I'm just saying I don't love what was said today, but I'm also not freaking out about it and saying this is unbelievable. I can't believe they would say this. Like, I see where they're coming from. And I just hope that they have that disciplined deadline. Like, I hope, like I said, I hope they trade Horvat and get a first-round pick for him. I hope they don't extend him and say, well, we really like this core.
Right. Yeah.
I'm done. We're way over time.
Okay.
Betway, go.
Yeah, let's get the Betway in here. You know what? The conversation is going to roll into tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll have more.
It'll be a good show.
We'll have more time. Like this, we're pretty recent off of this, taking away the big quotes. We're going to go back and obviously look at everything. I'll have to listen to the Jim Rutherford interview for the 3rd time. I was there and then had to listen to it back. We'll listen to it again. We'll hear more of it, and we'll talk about a lot more of this tomorrow. Chat's been excellent today. Appreciate that, everybody in the chat here on YouTube, everybody on podcast listening to it. Let's get to the Betway. Bets of the day. Pull it up, Alex. Where is it, Alex?
He's going to cycle through because the prospect.
He loves his ticker down there on the bottom, and he's mad about the prospects
report. We are so
report.
overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's mad. The Betway bets of the day here. Rocking with a couple of different ones. Maybe
you
I
never
didn't.
Sent me that way.
Oh, no.
Alex jumping in.
All
my gosh.
Well, Alex,
you just say it. Just say it. It doesn't matter.
Well, I don't even know what it is all the time here. I put it in there now, Alex. You can pull it up there. This is a mess. We've been going long. Betway is now in there.
Nobody got word of the day. I heard it.
Yeah, no, we'll do word of the day real quick here. Missed it.
Do you want to say what the word of the day is?
The word of the day today was purloin.
Mm-hmm. Give us a definition while we wait for Alex.
It was to appropriate wrongfully, and what is it? Or often by a breach of trust. I felt like I used it correctly today.
All right, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Betway, let's go. The bets.
All right, Betway, let's get out of here. The either ors, I got that today. Nikita Kucherov or Matty Beniers to score a goal in tonight's game. -175. Get that $10 bet. We'll return you $15.71 over there on Betway. Then our second one, the big one, Lightning to win over 6.5 total goals in the game and Kucherov to score a goal. So a couple bets going with Kucherov scoring tonight. So we're rocking with that over there on the old Betway.
19
bets.
plus to play if you choose to play responsibly.
Listen, like I said, this conversation, like the Canucks don't play till what, Wednesday? We have a whole show tomorrow to get into this more.
Be good tomorrow.
I got all these clips that I wanted to get to. I got a big thing. I was on the phone with agents all morning too. I got stuff to talk about, and I got none of it. I can't do it today.
Okay.
We're late on the show.
Okay,
anyways.
yeah.
All
okay.
Right.
For my co-host Chris Faber,
it wasn't sirloin, Dominic. It was purloin. Come on now.
For my co-host Chris Faber, who's now muted, and our technical producer Alex Allard. My name's Dave Quadrelli. Yeah, we did at the top. You weren't here, Alex.
Oh, I was on it.
It's okay. For our technical producer, as you just heard him there, folks, Alex Allard. My name is Dave Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation.
Montana's ribs.
Thanks for listening to Canucks Conversation, delivered by DoorDash. Hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.
How about keep it to a thank you, Jim?